Greetings and welcome to the People's Ascension for another WIP Workshop interview. This time we are joined by Allison and Dee here to talk about Alchemistresses. I'm very excited for this interview. This is a magical girl game. It is a genre that I am not very familiar with, but very excited to learn more about. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking Alchemistresses. And this is part of our month of one shots charity drive. It is not technically a one shot. This is just going to be an interview about a game that is currently being created and crowdfunded. So we don't have any fancy incentives as far as gameplay to reward you with, but the link is still available. It's still active down below. Check that out in the About section. You can click on the little banner there. We are currently raising funds for the National Abortion Federation and the Center for Reproductive Rights, both very important organizations right now. The first focuses on providing safety and supplies and logistics and all of that for actual abortion providers and healthcare facilities and whatnot, as well as providing actual monetary support and, more importantly, travel coordination and family coordination for anybody who may need those services. And then, of course, the Center for Reproductive Rights is the big legal and political advocate for abortion access and reproductive rights around the world, but is very much right now focusing on America and everything we have to deal with right now. So very important calls, and two very important organizations. So if you have the means and you like what we're doing and you want to support this cause, head down to that donation link and give what you can. Every little bit helps, and we have a little donation bar right up in the corner over there. Every $250 we raise will trigger a giveaway drawing, in which we have a number of incredible prizes gifted to us by some very generous supporters. One of which is actually a giveaway of Alchemistresses. So if you like what you see here, that could be something you win. But I think that is enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump into this. Actually, let me just remind before we get going what we are doing tomorrow. The audio disappeared, and now I'm on the wrong page. Here's a preview of Dragons of Amalta. Back to this. Thank you, Taylor. Apparently I didn't set up sound for that. Sorry about that. Yes, tomorrow we're doing Dragons of Amalta one shot. It's a game by Kat McDonald, who was the creator of Heroic Horde, the season 2 RPG's uncovered feature. So if you're familiar with that, or you want to go back and watch that because it was an amazing show, an amazing teaching the game, learning the game experience for everybody involved, especially myself. I will be playing Baby Dragon Maud, who is a main NPC in the RPG's Uncovered series. So we're going to be doing that tomorrow at 7 p.m. EST. All right, now let's jump into what we have planned for today, because I am excited to talk about Alchemistresses. But before we do that, let's hear from the creators. Tell us about yourselves. Let's start with Allison. Tell us about yourself and what you have going on.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm probably the person who's been working on Alchemistresses the longest, like 8 to 10 years long, which is my passion project. I am primarily, or I guess first and foremost, was a LARP designer. I moved into the TTRPG space when I was studying game design, and by day I make a Marvel fighting game as my day job. So that's fun. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, and also, sorry, they'd kill me if I didn't say this. I founded a workers cooperative game studio that also designs TTRPGs and stuff. So
very nice.
What's the name of it?
Oh, it's soft chaos. You can tell I'm great at prose.
I'll ask you more specifically about that later. We'll loop back around to that. And of course, we also have Dee, the co-designer
Yeah.
of this project. Hello, thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm Dee. I go by Dora sometimes as well. And yeah, I am also a designer, sort of a designer by default, because Allison has pulled me into it. But yeah, but also a designer, writer. And I've been working on Alchemistresses for a lot less time than Allison has, but I had done a lot of playtesting and a lot of work sort of informally on it over time, as Allison would just sort of be like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, I think I'm going to do this. Maybe like, I don't know, I don't like that at all. And then, we would talk about it. So eventually she very kindly formalized that labor by inviting me to join the team.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, well, what I like to do in these interviews, because I think it's just as important to get to know the creator and the inspiration for the game as it is to actually highlight the game. So you've already briefly talked about what each of you have done in the past. But Allison, I saw that you were the founder. You helped create the Soft Chaos. Uh, Tell us more about that. You briefly mentioned it's a cooperative for TTRPGs.
Oh, we do all kinds of games, video, non-video, client work. But primarily the stuff that we are a worker-owned cooperative. And so part of our model is that we always work on something we're passionate about while we're also doing all the client work. And we successfully crowdfunded a zine month project called Cadences recently. And we just got a giant, oh, for us, giant, we got a $10,000 grant from a community organization to turn one of our digitally mediated LARPs to get it in book form and then hopefully publish it. Um, so it's like we just try and make things we love and then hopefully get money for them later.
Yeah.
While on the side selling our services to rich people who need them.
There you go. Yeah, and I dropped your Twitters in the chat there for anybody following along who might want to go check out the other things you do. And yeah, Dee, on the Alchemistresses website, which I don't have pulled up, it does. Oh, I had this written down. It does list you as not just the game designer, but one of the main writers, and that you've created other things in the past. I was
Yeah,
looking at another game that I saw recently that has your name on it, Sapphic Slumber Party, which looked amazing.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I love Sapphic Slumber Party. I'm actually like, I made it 4 or 5 months ago, which isn't that long, but it's been a little out of my mind while we focus on
Hmm.
Alchemistresses. And then there was a wonderful stream of it on Girls from These Worlds
Hmm.
a few weeks ago. So it's been back on my mind again, and I love it.
Yeah, that's where I
So
saw it.
it's awesome. Yeah, that was a really fun time.
Hmm.
So it's that's a game that I think it communicates a lot about me and about my priorities as a designer, because it's just like the fluffiest, like most wholesome, um, like most whatever positive kind of experience, or it's trying to be, that you could ask for. It is about a slumber party, excuse me, a pillow fight that takes place at a slumber party. Um, the instead of losing HP, you gradually gain vulnerability as you get hit with pillows
Hmm.
until it all leads to some sort of emotional catharsis. Um, the thing that funny, I had forgotten this, and then when they did it on stream, like part of character creation is that you identify a vulnerability that your character has, and then somebody else tells you what's beautiful about them that they don't know is beautiful about them. And it's just amazing. Like, I don't credit myself with this, I credit like people who play the game. Like every time I play it, somebody comes up with something amazing for that, and I'm just like, wow, people are really great, aren't they?
Mhm.
There are so many ways to be beautiful. So anyway, yeah, that's my sensibility crashed into Alchemistresses
Yeah.
a year ago.
Yeah, I
When
could
I
see
tried
that
to
in
make
what.
it fluffier and about slumber party.
Yeah, I could see that in what I've seen of the game so far. And I do really enjoy games that build mechanics or at least help facilitate roleplay, uh, focused on boosting other people up. 'Cause I think that
Yeah.
really helps bring the game together and bring the party together.
Dee's major design question is, how do I get two girls to kiss before the end of it?
There you go.
It's true.
The most
Uh,
important design question.
yeah,
Sorry.
you gotta have a goal.
You do.
Yeah.
I know what I want.
And I also believe I read, talking about the Kickstarter specifically, this is not the first one you run. This is what, the third or fourth you've put together?
Third for me, it was on 3, and this is for the second. The last one was a game primarily designed by D and I, called Denial and Yearning, a trashy lesbian romance novel game.
I'm sensing a
It,
theme.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in which you take turns playing the author of a trashy lesbian romance novel and the leading lesbians in the novel, and you kind of like write this. You act out. You don't write, but you act out this lesbian romance novel. It's really fun. You get to make like the author. You get to write their author bio. We had it was just the two of us in a lesbian romance novel book club. And we love reading the bios because it tells you so much. They're
Mhm.
like
They all live with their partner and a cat.
and or like on a farm, and it's like Chris but spelled Kris. And their partner live on a farm in the Midwest. They love their cats, their dog, and that niece they buy cool. Anyway, it's great. So that's part of it.
Yeah, that game has a fun origin, which I get. It's funny because I feel like it connects to how I came onto Alchemistresses, which is just that we had Allison was visiting me, and we were as an activity while one of us was cooking or whatever. Usually Allison was cooking. I would read this lesbian romance novel to her, and we read through the whole thing over the course of the trip. And we disagreed about it. Allison was kind of like, "It's fine. Tell me if I'm mischaracterizing." Allison was like, "This is fine, but like, I'm not really that into it." And I was like, "I know that there's problems, but don't you feel like a swell of emotion?" And we ended up getting into like very heated arguments about like what a romance novel is, how the structure of a romance novel works, and then like whether or not the novel we were reading like lived up to that. And we had literally diagrams of romance novel sort of rising and falling action that we had made. And then we were kind of like, I guess we should turn this into a game, right? We have all of these materials now. And yeah, in a similar way, I mean, Alchemistresses was going to happen regardless because it's been Alice's present passion project for a long time. But I would get into spirited debates with her where it's like, that kind of mechanical shutdown player agency, you can't add it in. And
Mm.
so eventually that's how I got my way onto the team.
Yeah, you can draw a lot of design principles and pacing, guidelines and whatnot for gaming from all different
Mm,
kinds of literature, books, movies,
yeah.
TV shows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I recommend, like, if you want to write a romance novel, it's also a good game. But it like breaks down the structure. There's a denial act where people are denying how they feel, and then there's a yearning act where they know how they feel but they can't give into it. And then there's like a dramatic, I can't remember what we called it, but that dramatic event at the end, a crisis,
The
where like it all
crisis.
comes to a boil, and we like built it all into this game. And I think that structure holds for a lot of things,
Mhm.
actually.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
our theory anyway.
Our theory.
But yeah, and I think that's like the obviously that it's one particular school of TTRPGs, but a lot of the games that I personally prefer the most, I think Allison maybe has slightly more varied, diverse taste than I do, but I really like games that are trying to tell a specific kind of story or give you a specific kind of experience, which usually means something like very rooted in genre. So, I love Played by the Apocalypse games, for instance, which I think at their core are very much about being like, what are the things that happen in this genre? Like, okay, let me create strong, like, mechanical incentives for those things to happen in the story, and then like set the players loose on them.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, D brings a Monster Hearts sensibility to the game.
To everything, I hope.
It's a very big compliment too. So.
Yeah, I could definitely see the influence.
Oh yeah, it's a huge influence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have an Avery Alder tattoo. I don't actually, but I might.
Would not be surprised.
Okay. Yeah, well, talking more specifically about the Alchemistresses Kickstarter, I see it is actually you've reached your initial funding goal, which is great. That's a great start, and I see you have quite a few different
stretch goals.
Stretch goals. That's the word I was looking for. Stretch goals. Yes.
I think I got it.
Yes. And there's still 22 days left. It's still going on for the rest of the month. So you have plenty of time to meet those stretch goals. Just in brief, what are those stretch goals? What are you most looking forward to hitting?
What am I most looking forward to hitting? This is a little like so there are two things. One thing, and this is not the most exciting, but is that we get to pay people more.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm really excited to hit. Like I founded a workers cooperative. We care a lot about fair pay. And so like we did get to pay the writers 50 cents a word, which is a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
But like we get to pay them more if we hit this. So that's excited. I'm excited about getting hardcover books. It's my dream. I'm like, D's my realist. We like afford to get hardcover if we don't hit. Then she's like, no, Allison. I'm like, but what if? And she's like, you pay, like we've paid everyone else. We haven't paid any of the design team, right? She's like, we haven't paid ourselves. You can't spend all that money just making the books look better. And I'm like, can't I? So I'd love to hit that stretch goal so we can actually do it. And then the writing, I love our episode guide. That's the other one I'm most excited about. So we've written this like an episode guide for the GM, which serves the purposes, one, of like if there are experienced GMs who might not be genre familiar, it guides them through what a season of this magical girl anime would look like. And then if there are inexperienced GMs who might not be like used to crafting a story in a campaign setting, it helps do that. So it hits both of those. And we really want to I really want to dive in. And we have these guides for each episode of the season. The game takes place over a season, but I'd love to give spend a lot more time writing like example scenarios, like a filler episode. Oh, you could do like a beach episode or a hot spring episode, like the anime like cheap filler episodes, and talk about how to structure those mechanically and narratively, weave them into an arc.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I am excited to be able to spend time on if we hit that.
Yeah, and having those sort of GM story creation guidelines are very helpful, especially for new GMs who, as you said, might not be familiar with that particular genre, or are used to playing a very different game that might not be so narrative focused, so story interpersonal driven focused, because there's a big difference between the pacing and the writing for a monster beat 'em up game like most D&D is played, and a game about personal and interpersonal exploration.
Yeah, a lot of the guide is in the form of like tools, I guess, and questions in its current state. So this is before we get to write into the examples, but it's like, every magical girl, and if you watch Sailor Moon, you know this, gets an episode that focuses on them, right? And so the guide is like, okay, when an episode focuses on a character, you might want to meet with the player beforehand and ask them like these questions about the direction they want to take their character. Or you might on your character sheet you have like convictions and fears that are part of your character, and like you might want to take one of those and base the high school shenanigans around their like fear of not graduating, and you might want to base the magical villain on the regret they had that they let one of their colleagues die in the past life. So it's just like not giving prescriptive arcs, but like this episode in a magical girl anime serves the purpose of and then filling that in. So this
Mhm.
episode serves the purpose of developing a character, and here are tools you can have for this. Or this episode, the one where the magical mascot tells you something about the past world, serves the purpose of solidifying story lore. And we don't tell you that lore, but we give you kind of a framework to be able to do it
Yeah,
in.
guidelines and prompts, very helpful for new GMs. Yeah. And even experienced GMs, I look at anytime they're provided in a game that I pick up. I look at those because it helps me get into the genre and the world and the how the story is maybe not meant to, but inspired to flow by that game.
Yeah.
So we've gotten a lot of good hints into what exactly Alchemistresses is, but let's do an actual dive into the game itself and talk about that. So I like to break down my analysis of new games into rules, tools, and themes, and we cover a much more extensive scope of that on my RPGs Uncovered series. But I like to continue. I'd like to break that down even just for these interviews, and I find it most relevant to start off with themes, and I I watched both of the videos that you sent me, one as a narrative introduction to the game and one as a sort of rules introduction for the game, and I noticed that you described the core themes of this game straight off, and that is reincarnation, self-discovery, queerness, and feelings. So break that down for me. Give us a rundown of those themes and why this game focuses on that. Why it's so important.
I'll start and then I'll throw to D because I've been
Sure.
doing a lot of talking. Uh, but a lot of those like are kind of baked into the genre. A lot of the like the feelings and the drama, and particularly also through like this feminine aesthetic lens, this like magical girls. So a lot of those are. And I think one of the things that we focused on design wise the most is this self discovery, which
Mhm.
speaks to me as a queer person particularly.
Mm.
It didn't start exactly that way. It started with me watching Sailor Moon and being like, wait a minute, the Moon Kingdom is super cool, and they never tell me what happens in the Moon Kingdom. Why don't I get to know about the Moon Kingdom? Because there's this whole like magical like lore with kingdoms, and they don't tell you nothing, but they don't really explain much. And it's like it'd be really nice to have a game where your players got to build and explore that past world that is very far removed from themselves. And then that became, oh, now you have to reconcile the person you were in that past world with who you are now. And that's always something I've been like, Queen Serenity, Serena, like what's going on? How she transforms into a princess and then suddenly is much more calm and graceful. That always struck me when even when I was really little in the first episode of Sailor Moon, when she becomes that princess, suddenly she's a different person in some ways. And so it just developed into kind of exploring that, which I think, and I will say, well, I'll say I know for me speaks to my queerness, right?
Hmm.
These like reconciling who I am, who I want to be, what was expected of me, who I have been. And so that's kind of where that focus came up. And then high school shenanigans are just fun. Um, and D brings this up a lot, but I really also enjoy juxtaposing humor, comedy, and levity against deep emotional, deep emotional arcs. And that happens like the game is built to do that because you are like trying to get a date to prom, and then you're having a flashback to a world that was destroyed, remembering how it became destroyed, and then you're back to trying to get a date to prom. So it's like a real juxtaposition, and so I really love that and how that plays into feelings. Yeah, throwing it your way.
You said my thing about how you love juxtaposition. What
I
am I
know.
supposed to say now?
It's about me. I can say the thing about me.
um, yeah, I mean, I think that you covered it a lot of it pretty well. The so one thing that that I think we haven't really talked about before is that like I think that the approach to and I saw this evolve over the course of when I first started playtesting to the final design. Like the way that combat is implemented is very particular, because I think it was originally something closer to a traditional combat mechanic where
It
it's sort of
was
like
much crunchier. There were many
yeah,
more dice rolls.
it was very crunchy and there was sort of a lot of there's a lot of strategy about um, how you take villains out. It wasn't sort of like never not in a like positional sort of like mini way at all, um, but it got sort of honed down to something that I think is still pretty interesting, and Allison's really proud of the complexity that is built in there. But it's like the thematic storytelling is front and center, which feels very fitting for the genre. So like I mean, really, in most Sailor Moon episodes, combat is very much sort of like it's almost like ritualistic more than anything else. It's kind of like, okay, so this is the episode where Sailor Jupiter needs to learn a lesson, and she's learned that lesson, so now she uses her attack and it weakens the enemy, and then Sailor Moon uses her like mega attack and the enemy gets defeated. Um, and we're this is an RPG, so it's not sort of like that. It's not nowhere near that rigid or that like ritual, but we try to put a lot of emphasis on the emotional experience of the magical girls. There's a lot of flexibility about a friend of ours online, Jess Levine, pointed out that that enemies don't have health; they have resolve. Resolve to stay in the conflict. So you can lower somebody's resolve by hitting them with a fireball, but you can also, depending on who it is, like lower their resolve by like pleading with them not to do this, or by taunting them, or by any number of like more emotional angles. And there's also something about like the I'll let Allison talk about the mechanics of how that work exactly, but it's designed to sort of be a little bit sticky in that it requires you to like you can't really take somebody out in one hit most of the time, but then sometimes people will just sort of like at a certain point they'll just fold very quickly, and which is all about sort of mimicking that feel of like like Sailor Mars used her attack and it didn't work this time, like what a surprise, what a powerful enemy. Now Sailor Jupiter used hers and it did work, and now Sailor Moon finishes it off, right? Like it's designed to sort of mimic that rhythm. Gosh, sorry, I'm going off on rules, aren't I? And the question is about themes. But
So let me summarize. The themes are all those feelings, and also three like parts of play. There are three thematic parts of play, which D just went on one of, but it's like high school shenanigans, like conflicts with magical bad guys, and then flashbacks to your past life. So those
Yeah.
are the three. Okay, I brought it back.
Yeah,
Good job.
You preempted my next question, which was the breakdown of the game into those three different positions of play.
Again, a lot of what we did with design was being like what feels like a magical girl show. So the combat, like it used to be like, or what feels, not even just what feels like, but what feels fun about a magical girl show. And the combat, it was really complicated before, and we're like, oh, is that what is fun? I think it was Legendary Vermin, one of the writers on the game, who asked like, what is fun about magical girl combat? And we're like, oh, it's that like building up a friendship power, and then at the end Sailor Moon uses like moon healing escalation, and then everything's great. And so what feels fun about, this is like my ideal one because it doesn't really exist. What would feel fun for me would be like a version of Sailor Moon where there's high school shenanigans, which are fun. There's like doing spells in a little more of a novel way. Like it's not like you cast the same, like it's not like Sailor Jupiter casts the same spell. It's very much more akin to like bending from Avatar. Like you control an element. So there's that. And then you get to learn about the Moon Kingdom this time, finally. So we were like, these are the fun things. And yeah, in our GM guide, we're like, this is how you could break down an episode. There's usually like a social problem. Oh, it's Valentine's Day and one of your PCs doesn't get a Valentine, right? And then there's a magical problem. Like one of the seasons we played had tarot themed villains, right? In the tradition of, and like, oh, the lovers will be there on Valentine's Day, and they're going to deal with this conflict between the two players in the present day, and then you'll get a flashback that deals with those two characters in the past world. So you kind of weave it all into these beautiful episodes. And one thing that's really it doesn't, I want to preempt with saying it doesn't feel like it's on rails, but one of the great things about magical girl anime is like it is very formulaic. And as a GM, like your bad guy will show up wherever, like, your bad guy will show up 20 minutes into the 30-minute episode. Doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter where you are. They are a magical, mystical being that just shows up from the Negaverse.
Mm.
You're in a jewelry store, they're in the jewelry store. That's great. You're like, you're driving down the highway, they're driving down the highway. So it's like, that's what I love. I love being able to put that in as well, because it is such a trope of the genre. And it also, like, as the GM, helps me a lot. And I'm like, okay, if I need to pace an episode, I know like what's gonna happen, and it's fun to have them interrupt. Like, oh, you're about to ask someone to dance or kiss you. Oh no, sorry, bad guy's there now.
Mm.
And to say something else that is more like, to get back to the themes a little bit, the contrast between the different levels is also about building a tension between particularly between the past self and the present self.
Right.
Is one of the central themes, and also like one of the central tools that a GM has. So like we had a great plot line, and sort of our longest our playtest campaign that we did recently to test sort of like the whole season long arc, where two characters had been romantically involved in the past and in their past lives, and at a certain point one of them started flirting with the other in the present, and that person was sort of like, I'm actually not comfortable with this. Like, you're just sort of reenacting something from our past. I don't really believe that it's about us. So like I'm sort of giving you a clear no. And they both, like, that, it was just like that drove the drama for both of those characters for the whole season, right? Like that examination of like which of them is right. Like, are there still feelings here? How do they have to change for them to be like romantically involved again? Do they want to sort of relive what they did in their past lives, or was that a mistake? Can they revisit some of those same feelings but avoid the mistakes that they made? So like, and the interplay between the three pillars, right? Like the where you're acting things out in the present, and then you see how something contrasting in the past, and then you have to deal with that in the present again, is a big part of what the game's about. How the self-exploration theme comes through.
Yeah, the self-discovery, and then also sort of interpersonal discovery. And then, as you said before, that juxtaposition of, is it current you? Is it past you? Is it some other you don't quite understand? I could see that all kind of playing together and creating some very interesting stories. And I would say the rules, from what I've been able to see of it, do a good job of reflecting that, and we can kind of move back into some of that rules discussion to get a little better grasp of the gameplay that you're going to get out of Alchemistresses. And you've brought up other games that use similar resolution mechanics, in the fact that this game has 3 simple stats: mind, spirit, and body. And then you would assign either a D4, D6, or D8, and that can be augmented in various ways. What is it? I know you said previously that this originated as a chunkier system. How did you refine that down, and why did you pick mind, spirit, and body? What does that say about the gameplay and the stories you tell with it?
Actually, Dee, if you want to start, I'm going to pull something out of a drawer. I have the original character sheet from the first game that we played of this like 8 years ago. I'm going to show you what a mess it was. Well,
I'm really intimidated to start knowing that you're about to pull out something from 8 years ago. I mean, I think that the the way that I've always thought about those 3 is, I mean, I think first of all, there is a level of convenience, right? That this is not a game that has like 20 skills. It's sort of like, here are 3 kind of general aspects of a person. And like, sort of tell yourself where you sit, and then we are going to make the action of the game work within those. I've always thought of it in terms of, again, and I'm sorry, I know you're not super familiar with Sailor Moon, but like I can map each of those onto a character really instantly, right? So like Ami, Sailor Mercury, is like the genius. Makoto, Sailor Jupiter, is like the strong one, the physical powerhouse, and then like Ray and Minako, the Sailor Mars and Sailor Venus, are like the charismatic ones, the driven, determined ones, and then Usagi is like, sort of is a little hopeless at all three of those. Bless her heart. That's why we love her. Um, so like they have like an immediate root in like the genre. And do you have something to add to that, Allison?
Discord and D, I don't even know if you know this, but there is an official Sailor Moon TTRPG book, and
I know vaguely, yeah.
I didn't look into it until like very recently, and it has the same 3 stats. The mind, body, spirit, exactly named the same way. So I'm like, oh, we must have done something right. This is the original. I don't know if it's gonna show up on the camera. This is the original character sheet. Oh no, you can't see it.
Nah,
Look at all those skills with all
yeah.
those numbers. And then it's a flip over sheet. Oh, you unlock all these other skills with all these other numbers. It's so much writing. You have composure and health, which are different things. You have it's a fate, essentially a complicated fate hack. So
Mm.
you have daily stunts and magical stunts and aspects and consequences. And yeah. Anyway, paring it down just felt like magical girls TV shows aren't about complicated strategy. And pausing to roll die is like one of the mechanics in the game is that you have to shout the transformation phrase, which to me
Mhm.
felt more important than like adding another die roll. So I'm like everything I can take out so that I can add something that feels magical girly makes me a happier person.
Mhm. And I noticed one of the ways that you referred to the mechanics was that it puts greater emphasis not on what exactly you are doing as defined by these stats, but how you go about trying to enact that change. So you don't have to worry about having survival skill versus wilderness tracking or any number of niche skills. You can look at it through the lens of your own character and find some way to approach the problem in something that is uniquely you.
One of my favorite, like, I just have a problem solving brain, I guess. So I prefer like not knowing a specific thing, but like having a skill that can then figure that thing out. So that's kind of where that falls in, right? Like,
I think it leads to conversations that are a little bit akin to, and I don't know, I think Allison is super familiar with Blades in the Dark, and I don't know how much you are, Jack, but
Mhm.
like in Blades in the Dark, you have these discussions where you'll sort of be like, there's sort of this negotiation where you're like, okay, here's what I'm doing. This is hunt, right? And the person's like, no, this is scrap. Like, so yeah, you can use hunt, but it'll be lesser effect.
Mhm.
And then the player has to be like, no, I want to use. Okay, I'll use scrap. I was on we did an actual play recently where I described my mental character like sort of performing a tackle, and then the GM was just like, "Is that body?" And I was like, I literally said like physically attack. So yeah, I think I really have to say body, but it creates that opportunity for conversation, and like trying to be creative about your approaches.
Mhm.
I love coming up with like odd spells and then having to justify how to use them. So like I had a spell for one character that was just like teleportation, right? Which is very powerful, but like you have to be kind of creative to use it offensively or to achieve certain kinds of objectives with it. So I love to do that and then like lavishly describe the elaborate action that I take and then be like, and because I said the word determined, it's spirit, right? And
Mm.
then, like having the GM be like, maybe.
Yeah, I like games that encourage a negotiation between players and
Yeah.
GMs because I think you get more interesting stories out of that than the rule as written says I can do this. Well, rule as written says you can't. That's not as interesting as
Right.
one person coming up with a really cool idea and then the GM actively trying to find a way to encourage that creativity.
Yeah.
and I also like things where the same task is different difficulties for different people. right? So like part of the rules are
And the different approaches
you
they take.
you can try and like math your way over a pole vault, but that's nearly impossible, right? So you can make a mind roll for it if you want, but you're probably not going to do it. Whereas with a body roll, that's probably easier, right? So
Mhm.
I like that. I like that different challenge levels for different approaches.
Well, you could see that in I can think back to some of the early cartoon, early animes that I'm familiar with. In that there usually is that nerdy kid who has that episode, and they need to perform some physical feat, and then the big jock kid's like they're never gonna be able to do this, and then they have that beautiful not mind numbers gif all over them, and they grab the pole vault and they calculate how much it has to bend and where exactly you need to hit, and they do manage to make that jump. So I like games that allow you to play those characters and play into your strengths while also rewarding your weaknesses in an interesting narrative way. That's not just a mechanical, you can't do this, so why even bother.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love it when people love failures.
Yes.
That's another thing. Dee, you don't
Yeah.
know this because this is before your time, but that's actually part of where the memory die came from.
Oh,
So there's
sure.
like a special die you roll whenever you're a magical girl, and if you roll the highest number or the lowest number, two things happen. One is you either get something good, or it's like you get an alchemy point,
Mhm.
or you get a condition. If it's low, you get a condition. High, you get an alchemy point. But you also get a memory, and it's like a quick flashback to your past life, and it's either a good memory or a bad memory. And we wanted to create this thing where people could like roll a 1, have something bad happen to them, and then narrate a bad memory, but like really enjoy it. And people do. They're like they get to narrate because these past flashback memories are these like dramatic failures that they had, or like some tragic breakup, or like they watched their sister die when the king came. And so one of the initial like motivators of that was we want this we want something in there that like rewards failure in a narrative way that makes it more
Right.
fun.
Yeah, so it's
And
it's
then
not just a mechanical detriment
yeah,
that you have to suffer through. It actually rewards you with the ability to create interesting narrative that could lead into more positive story going forward.
and then
Yeah.
Dee brought the like a very strong fail forward and fail spectacularly ethos. I'm a big fan of this fail spectacularly. Like there was a prom that one of my characters was trying to make a glorious entrance into and like have all eyes on her, and she failed, and she still made a spectacular entrance, but it was like a really embarrassing one,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone pointed and laughed. So I'm really big into like the failures, and we try and write that in as often as we can. The failures being like as fun to play as
Yeah.
the
Right.
successes.
And it leads somewhere. There's games out there where you fail something and the narrative stops, or it becomes less interesting, or you're disheartened as a player and as a character. But I like
Yeah.
games that approach mechanics narratively, as I see a lot of things I've saw here, that as you said, it allows the story to continue in an interesting way, whether that is immediately good or bad.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
were you the one, or was it Liv even? It was like, why is your door locked in a TTRPG? If I fail at unlocking that door, is
Mm-hmm.
it fun for me or not? If it's not fun, then why is the door locked?
Right.
Like that's
Right.
something that I've always like kept in my
Yeah.
mind.
Not that locked doors can't be interesting, but like yeah, it's like we
But
don't
you have to
want
ask
them to
why.
just be.
They can be interesting as long as you ask why and you can answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Allison, when we talk about like failure is interesting, the story that comes to mind is your favorite story, which is when we had this like bundle of we had this very convoluted plot that I won't explain in full, where two dates were happening at the same time in the same restaurant. It wasn't like a farce. We weren't like it wasn't like one person on two dates. It was four people in two couples on dates, and we were like this was in our high school selves obviously, and like both the PCs who were involved just rolled disastrously and it went really badly, and we as the players were just enjoying that. You're treasuring it so much, like that experience of our characters just having these
Characters
completely
having
mortifying
like
dates.
Mm.
the worst Cyrano de Bergerac that has ever happened. There was like
Yeah.
bad whispers of advice. Oh, it was so good.
I blurted out "I love you" to my ex that I was trying to make nice with. It was really bad. And that's kind of the in addition to sort of like the fail forward idea, right? Of just like that if I fail to open the door, it's not just that I'm now standing in front of a door, it's that like something happens to drive the story forward. But it's also that like it can be really fun and interesting to fail and to have things not turn out the way that your character wants. And that's built into the spirit of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think this is all really well baked into the mechanics that you would see. I know it was presented mostly in the video as described through through some narrative aspects, but also through combat. In that you have convictions that can allow you to increment a dice roll, and conditions that could allow you to decrement or force you to decrement the dice roll, and then alchemy points and memories, and resolve being much more than just HP, just how much damage you can lose, because a lot of those anime shows, and I'm sure this is even more the case with Magical Girl, the villain's objective is not really to kill the heroes. One, because that's a bit too gruesome for a children's or young adult show, but also because it's less interesting. It's more about demoralizing or distracting or turning them to a particular way of thinking, which I think provides a lot more narrative uses for mechanics. And I'm a big fan of narrative mechanics over necessarily floating variables and all that extra crunchiness.
Yeah, there's also one of my favorite things about the resolve is like uh there's mechanics, you can watch the video, but you have a die that is like your resolve, and it lowers as you take emotional or
Mm-hmm.
physical stress, and you roll it, and if you ever roll one, your resolve wavers, and you might get forced out of the scene. But the way you stay in the scene is you have to spend an alchemy point, but you have to like come up with a conviction or a memory or something, and you have to be like, this is what's keeping me going.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is how you stay in the scene. And I'm like, those kinds of ways to tie the mechanics with the narrative.
Yeah, and it all comes back
Is one of my
to who
favorites.
you are and why you do what you do.
Yeah. I believe in myself and my friends.
There you go.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on time, and I think we've done a good job of talking about the theme and the setting, and also a brief introduction to some of the rules and the gameplay that they would get from Alchemistresses. So for anybody who hasn't, well, like myself, who hasn't had a lot of experience with the magical girl genre, both television or any sort of gameplay that mimics that, how would you pitch this to somebody who is interested but doesn't really know what exactly they're getting into or how to work with it?
I'd love to hear your pitch first, D, because I have one.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I would probably say that that this is a. I'd say that this is a game that has uh, a lot of opportunity for magic adventure, for like world building that gets to be participatory at the table. It also it's going to feature both like that kind of like magical adventure and combat, but it also has puts a lot of emphasis on relationships and like identity and exploring who the characters are, how they relate to each other, how they're going to change over time, and that it also uh, like is both encourages kind of like levity and playfulness, and there will be a lot of moments where you're just laughing out loud. And it's also capable of a lot of drama, often like very close together at the same time. Um, that's how's that, Allison?
That's much more in depth than mine. One of the things I would say is that if you don't have familiarity with the magical girl genre, it shares a lot with Monster
Oh,
of the Week format television shows. So if you've seen like a Buffy or you've seen a Supernatural, a lot of that structure, like, and we used Power Rangers. Power Rangers is a magical girl show. That's it. I don't care what people
I can
say.
see that.
It's my strong feeling. It carries a lot from these other cultural references that you have and that you can use as a touchstone. And then we kind of guide you through what it is to be a magical girl. And it does a lot of, like, if you want to talk about deep themes, it does a lot of what Dee says. But I think there's a lot of cultural touchstones that you probably have that are much more adjacent than you think that we bridge through our like episode guide. You'd be like, oh, I know what a bottle episode is. Oh, I know what a character focus episode is. Or like, and then you also get to describe yourself transforming into a magical girl, which is lots of fun. So
I
Right.
think another way to say what you just said, Allison, is that that I thought of, especially when you brought up Power Rangers, is that it's like people who like anime but haven't seen magical girl stuff, that like magical girl is very close to shonen anime, right? Like it's very much about like the moment where like when so Usagi saying like no, I love my friends, and then transforming into a beautiful princess with like a long trailing dress, and is like the same moment as Naruto saying like I guarantee it, and then like a giant, like throwing a giant fireball. It's like the same moment, right? It's about
Yu-Gi-Oh going,
going.
I believe in the heart of the cards.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
it's like the same thing.
They're both expressions. They're both expressions of like emotional growth and being fully honest with yourself, like being fully yourself, right? It's just that magical girl anime approach it, and like the whole genre, however, whatever medium it comes through, approaches that from a direction of like celebrating femininity, celebrating like love and affection and admiration for others. And it's really cool, and you should consider checking it out. That's my pitch for magical girls in general.
There you go. Yeah, I think that was a great way to put that. It is a game, from what I've seen, it's a game that really facilitates and encourages the exploration of yourself and your character and their role in the party and the role in the world, and in this case multiple different worlds, multiple different timelines that you get to play with. It's a game about the character and how they fit in and how they understand themselves, more so than about the enemies that they fight or the obstacles that they overcome. The focus is on the individual rather than the problem.
And those enemies in the episode guide will tear your character apart. They'll be like,
And you get
you
fun
don't
stuff like that. Yeah.
understand what love is. You've never been loved. That's my favorite.
Ooh.
So.
The real reason Allison made this game is because she wanted to be able to say really mean things as a villain.
Well, there you go. I mean, isn't that every GM's?
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
All right. Well, I think that does pretty much cover every talking point that I wanted to hit. Is there anything I missed from your experiences or Alchemistresses that you'd like to get out?
We did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
No.
Back the Kickstarter if you're
Yes.
interested.
Oh, that's probably wise.
That would be the thing I say. And hopefully, like, our goal, honestly, my like dream goal is to get to the next stretch goal where we can afford to pay everyone 25% more. That's like my pie in the sky by the end, because it's a pretty high stretch goal. Because we paid a lot of people, so getting them 25% more is a high number. But yeah, that's my dream.
Yeah, and I think that the only other thing to add to that is that like the real reason when we were talking about the Kickstarter and the reason for doing it and like the strategy for all the prep we did, I would ask Allison, like, what do you want out of this? Like, why are we doing a Kickstarter? And like her answer was really like, I want a lot of people to play this because like I really enjoy this game. I think people I play it with really enjoy it. I'm just eager for it to get out of the world. So if you back at the lowest tier, that's awesome too. We want you to just be able to play the game.
Tell us you play it. That's like, it'll be a couple of it'll be months before it comes out. But if you get it and tell us you play it, that's like, that's why I design games.
Allison will be like Usagi when she's looking at Mamoru, just big hard eyes.
That is my favorite part of doing this show, this channel, working with indie TTRPG creators, that you really get to see that personal connection and that enthusiasm and the appreciation of other people just experiencing the thing that they've put so much blood, sweat, tears, love into. It really makes gaming a lot more personal. All right. Well, I think that is it for our Alchemistresses talk. So I just linked the Kickstarter in there as well. We've had a brief discussion of the rules, tools, and themes, and generally of the setting of Alchemistresses. If this is a game that you're interested, go check out that Kickstarter. There's other videos on there that have a more in-depth look at the world and the design and some of the mechanics of it. Plenty of things that you can read about the game, and you can look into those stretch goals and whatnot. So go check that out. Go tell other people about the game. The best way to broaden our TTRPG horizons is to try new things and to get other people into the games and try new things. So even if this doesn't sound like a game that you can immediately relate to, maybe go check it out and see if you might be able to find some connection. So let me pass this back to you two once more to sign off. Allison, thank you so much for being here, talking with me about this, introducing me to this new genre.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the work you're doing this month. I hope, everyone, I hope one of you gets a really cool copy of Alchemistresses as part of that. So thank you.
All right. And where can we find you and the other things you're doing?
Again, promo stuff. You can find me at Allison K. Cole on Twitter, or at soft_chaos. Those are my workers cooperative. You can follow our work there. Both a lot of cool game stuff coming out of both of them.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's been really great. Thanks for watching. Anybody who's watching. And you can find me on Twitter at DoraD_. And you can find some of my other work on itch at dcity.itch.io.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Yes, and as always, I'm Jack of the People's Ascension. We're not running any current RPGs Uncovered season right now, but we are running the July month of One Shots charity drive for reproductive rights and abortion access. It's a very important call, something that I very much believe in, very much want to support. So there's a link down below. I mean, we're at the end of the show already, but if you're watching this on YouTube or on the VOD, that is going to remain active all month. Drop in with any donations that is going to continue to go towards the giveaway goals and whatnot. And it's just a very important time to come together, and I look forward to working with a number of fantastic creators like the two we have here, with games that are very personal, and you get that connection with the creator and the gamer and the game itself. So we're going to be exploring even more of that throughout the month. So check on by our Discord and our Twitter for more announcements of other cool shows coming up, like Dragons of Amalta tomorrow. But with that, yes, go check out Alchemistresses, and everybody have a great evening. Thanks for watching, and have a magical journey of your own. Night, everybody.
Night.